this is the last one. I will do it as fast as possible. Okay, today my topic is relationship between English learning motivation types and self-identity change among Chinese students. And the four authors are all from China and Beijing. And this research is basically focused on the change of learners' self-identities in learning English, which paralyze non-linguistic outcomes and members' self-concept. And to investigate English learning motivation types and self-identity changes among university students in China. And here, self-identity is how the learner perceives him or herself in terms of linguistic and cultural groups that he or she belongs to, as well as the learner's values, communication styles, abilities, and worthiness. And here, from Gartner, there are two major types of motivation. One is instrumental and the other is integrative. And there are two sets of learning outcomes. One is linguistic and the other one is non-linguistics. And from the learning outcomes, here comes linguistic outcome means it consists of target language proficiency. And as for the non-linguistic outcomes, it consists of more general changes in the learner. And later on, Lambers, he applied a new model, which included self-concept in learning outcome. Okay. And here, the authors mentioned that most studies in China now focus on linguistic outcomes of learning, as indicated by proficiency test scores, which means they use proficiency test scores to judge your learning outcomes. Okay, and these studies were concerned with the first, what kind of motivation led to higher proficiency achievement, and then how motivation and other learner factors influence learning achievement. Okay. And as for the non-linguistic outcomes, here comes two kind of bilinguals. One is subtractive and the other one is additive. Okay, we look at subtractive bilinguals first. The native language and native culture identity are replaced by the target language, which means the language you are learning, and target culture identity. Okay, and from additive bilingualism, it means when a second language and culture have been acquired with little or no pressure to replace or reduce the first language. Okay, and this both subtractive and additive bilingualism, they both involved changes not only in language proficiency but also in cultural identity. Okay. So once again, the researcher they stress that in China, research has largely focused on linguistic outcomes of learning in terms of English proficiency. Okay, and learners' self-identity change only relevant in English as a second language context, where target culture exposures are abundant. Okay, and self-identity change is unimportant or irrelevant in English as a foreign language context. That's why the research on linguistic outcomes is abundant. It means a lot. And research on non-linguistic outcome is limited. Okay. And then motivation has caught great research attention in China since the 1980s as a modifiable learner factor that influences the linguistic outcome of learning. But on the other hand, non-linguistic outcomes, the findings are limited. But the researchers, they think that it's worth noticing. Okay. And so one of the researchers, Gao, proposed the concept of productive bilingualism. Okay. With productive bilingualism, the command of the target language and that of the native language positively reinforce each other. So deeper understanding and appreciation of the target culture goes hand in hand with deeper understanding and appreciation of the native culture. That means if you got more understanding about the language you are learning and the culture, so you will go back to have more understanding about your own language and culture. Okay, and then learners' cognitive, affective, and behavioral competence are enhanced. Okay. So, studies focused on learning motivation in China have mostly followed the classical theory of Gaudium and its expanded emergence developed in Western context, without systematically examining their appropriateness for the EFL context in China. Okay. So, and the researchers, they think that the following issues remain to be addressed. A systematic bottom-up study on Chinese learners' motivation types is yet to be conducted. Okay, they want to know more about Chinese students' motivation. Okay, and then non-linguistic outcomes in EFL context need to be explored. Factors like self-confidence may be an outcome or a result, as well as a cause of successful bilingualism. Okay, it is necessary to examine the possible relationship between motivation types and self-identity change. Okay, so if you try to correlate the two, that means the motivation and self-identity change, okay, you will provide teachers with a fuller picture of learners and the learning process and take pedagogical measures accordingly. And the current study and this study aim to explore the relationship between English learning motivation types and self-identity change of Chinese university undergraduates. Okay, so here comes the research questions. The first one, were there any relationships between Chinese university students' English learning motivations and their self-identity changes? Okay, if so, what were they? And before we do the research question, there are two preliminary questions. First, what were their motivations for learning English? Did they undergo self-identity changes after learning English? Second, effects of demographic features were also examined to capture possible group variations in motivation types and self-identity.